My job's to help keep the government honest. It's a kind of a watchdog on the government of the day. I don't report to the government, I report to Parliament. I'm independent of the government, and I have quite wide discretion.
John Ryan, Controller and Auditor General. No mandate to comment on government policy decisions, but his job is to hold public organisations to account.
How do you meet those obligations anyway?
Well, 85% of what we do is the kind of audit you have in the private sector as well. We look at the financial statements, we look at their performance reporting, how they're actually accounting for their performance. And then I have about 15% of what I do is quite discretionary, so it's up to me to determine what I do in that space. I survey a representative group of New Zealanders every year and ask them what are they interested in. I have raupu Māori who give me advice and support in my role. I have local and central government advisory groups. I spend a lot of time in Parliament. Every day we have people inside public organisations, so I get a lot of intelligence about what's of interest. And then I publish a draft of my work plan for the coming year. People can comment on that, and then I get going and do it.
You must be a bit scary to some people.
I think the title isn't that friendly, Controller and Auditor General. I think it does conjure up ideas of, fraud and scrutiny. I try not to be. I think I'm here really for Parliament and ultimately for New Zealanders to know that the taxes they pay are being spent well and we're getting good results.
John's office can initiate its own inquiries or respond to requests from the public, an employee, parliamentarians or another organisation to look at how public money is used across thousands of public entities. Last week it was Oranga Tamariki. It's government departments, schools, councils, hospitals, universities. His office has inquired into the procurement process for the likes of Gumboot Friday. It's looked into the books of the Health Commissioner, even whakaata Māori.
One thing is they've got the money and are they accounting for it? The other is what value are we getting for that money? And are they accounting for that well? And then I can look at effectiveness and efficiency of government programs. I've looked at whānau ora, I've looked at child poverty, I've looked at how well education understands the progress of students through the education system. I've recently looked at treaty settlements, but I also look at, for example, in local councils, how they're building strategic relationships with Māori in their area and what impact that's had. I've looked at particular initiatives that were funded specifically for Māori. How well were they designed? How have they gone? What do Māori think of them? My ultimate game is trust in the government of the day, and you'll know as well as I that Māori have lower trust. And so I want to know, is the government doing its job for Māori?
How's it going so far?
Well, I think one of the things I would say is that we can't tell sometimes.
More on treaty settlements later, but first this.
It's just really unappealing for the kids.
The food quality is not the best, so kids are still hungry.
Just this month, the Auditor General announced his office will investigate the planning, procurement and implementation of the controversial school lunches program after a wave of complaints about quality, portion size, even safety, and this.
This is one of the companies the government backed to deliver more than 120,000 school lunches a day to hungry kids. Now, it's gone belly up.
These are designed to feed kids, so it's quite an important task. So we will look at how the procurement for that operated, so how did they decide on how to, which providers and how they assessed whether they were able to deliver and how they're delivering. So we'll look at kind of how the contract was set up and how it's been managed.
So when you say they, you're talking about the ministry?
Ministry, typically. That's the agency that we'd look at mostly for this, I think, although, it's early days.
And so what won't you look at?
Obviously, we won't look at the policy choice as to whether there should be or shouldn't be school lunches. That's for the government rightly to decide. It's not the job of the Auditor General. But once the decision's been made, we want to make sure it's been effective and efficiently implemented.
How long might that investigation or inquiry take?
We don't usually put timeframes on them because it depends on, the availability of information, how quickly we can get that information and assess it. But that's typically, a few months, and then we work through a process of finalising a report and tabling it.
And those reports often lead to more inquiries.
Can you give an example of some of your work that has created change?
I have looked at inappropriate behaviour, inappropriate sexual behaviour inside the military. When we looked at that a couple of years ago, we surveyed all those people in the military, got 6,000 or so responses, and we looked at how the military was dealing with that. And what we found was there were lots of things that needed to be changed, and we've gone back and just recently and looked at what the military's done. They've done a great job of actually responding to it. So that's at a sort of very human level about integrity and good behaviour inside public agencies.
The Auditor General described his recent report on treaty settlements as one of the most important in his 7-year term. He noted there are over $2.7 billion worth of financial and commercial redress commitments in treaty settlements, with 150 public organisations, around 12,000 individual contractual commitments with 70 or so groups. A lot of numbers, a lot of dollars. And after his inquiry, a clear pattern emerged.
Every agency had struggled at some level to deliver on the redress aspects of settlements. We found generally, though, that the public sector hadn't focused enough on understanding their treaty commitments, and there's a lot of them.
Complex too, and through the Office of the Auditor General, the Māori Affairs Select Committee heard about Māori frustrations and concerns.
Settlement negotiations are a whole of Crown effort, and PSGs we spoke to saw that as a quite well-coordinated effort and well-resourced, and they felt that fell away after the settlement was reached.
Yeah. A treaty settlement records the story, it has an apology, it has redress, but the expectation out of that is that there's a reset in relationships between Ngā Hapū and the Crown. And I think that was the aspect that was least well developed. At a basic level even, that making it easy for the post-settlement governance entity to understand how the redress was being managed, for example.
Was that a surprise to anyone?
It validated what post-settlement governance entities had been feeling and saying. And by me putting that into my report and tabling that in Parliament, I think what it does is it raises that issue into the consciousness of the Parliament much more than possibly it had been. You're absolutely right, though. People have been raising those kind of issues for some time.
So is it a lack of willingness? Is it not a priority? Or is there something systemic that's happening?
I think at an agency level, they really need to understand those commitments. These are legal commitments.
Yeah, so what's the implication of not delivering on it?
So agencies need to manage them as fundamental legal commitments of the agency. They need to govern them as fundamental legal commitments. They need to report on them as fundamental legal commitments. And not only because they're legal commitments, but they're constitutionally important. I think at the other level is also a system response required. So how well are we reporting on these things to ministers? How well are we reporting on these commitments to Parliament and ultimately therefore to the public? How are we giving effect to the intent to reset relationships as a consequence of these settlements? I think all of that needs a bit more work and leadership across the public sector.
So where does the buck stop? More after the break.
No mai ki te ao with Moana. We're back in 25, looking at the world around us through a Māori lens, connecting the dots across Aotearoa and beyond. The politics, the people, the stuff that affects our whānau. We're here for you, challenging and celebrating as well, every Monday night on Whakaata Māori.
Kia ora anō. The Auditor General's Office makes recommendations. John Ryan makes mention of how the Crown has signed off on legal commitments within treaty settlements, which raises some interesting questions. Are chief executives aware of all this? How across it are they?
More work can be done to upskill chief executives that need it. More work can be done to put accountability mechanisms in place around them.
We have people that represent the Crown in negotiations on a daily basis for a long time. They almost become emotionally tied to what the settlement is all about. But then post-settlement, that group of people move on to the next one, and then there's a whole fresh one that actually doesn't have any of that history of what this is, the relationship that's been formed in that. And I do I reflect on making a statement more than a question. I reflect on the fact that that's potentially part of the problem.
Falls off the cliff.
Yeah, well, I think that's an interesting observation, because I think what the public sector does once the settlement's been reached is it looks like a series of tasks to deliver, rather than the bigger intent that's behind it.
One of the things that I've seen in my own mahi is that agencies or ministries will see themselves as distinct from other ministries or agencies, whereas Māori look at, say, a Ministry of Education or whatever as the Crown.
I think that's a very true statement, that post-settlement governance entities told us that they were expecting, I think at some level, a much more coherent response after the settlement that was done from the public sector. And one of the things we raised in the report is that very issue. They shouldn't have to chase around between agencies to work out where things are at.
The Auditor General describes the need for a change in mindset.
You know, I think when you think of the word settlement, sometimes you think of, I don't know, buying and selling a house where you do the transaction and then everyone goes their own way. These settlements aren't that. These settlements are about resetting a relationship, and it's an enduring relationship. And I think that's the sort of mindset that the public sector needs to bring to the implementation of treaty settlements.
It's interesting because it's that enduring part that is quite a political football, I guess. It's the part that people look at and are going, hang on, why is that tribe involved in that thing over here,
Yeah, I'm not really commenting on government policy. It's the law. It's what's in the settlements.
And you talked about the David Goliath sort of thing?
The public sector is big. It's got resources, it's got lots of people, it's got complex systems, and we're asking relatively small post-settlement governance entities in some places to engage with that. And I think we need to make it a lot easier for them to engage with the public sector on their settlement implementations.
His report contains 9 recommendations.
So we have a little experience in Te Ao Māori with, say, like the Waitangi Tribunal, where there's been quite serious and forensic inquiries, recommendations come out, and the expectation is raised, and then there's no obligation on the Crown to actually deliver on those recommendations. Is it different for your office?
No, I basically make recommendations, and it is up to the department, the agency, the council, whomever, to decide whether they implement those recommendations. I do make my recommendations though to Parliament. I do follow up on my recommendations. I do make continuous comment on the ones that I think need to be implemented or have yet to be implemented.
In terms of treaty settlements, the Select Committee heard how the Crown had reneged on agreements with and for iwi to have priority on purchasing Crown-owned or leased land.
The rights of first refusal we call out particularly because that's a major part of redress and settling. And the fact that those systems, memorials, weren't necessarily well managed or in place in all cases, and some properties have been sold that should have had a right of first refusal when Lynn's looked at it, a number of agencies, a number of memorials that needed to be put in place.
Does that mean that different entities could use the law against the Crown or these ministries if their commitments are not fulfilled?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, so I couldn't answer that question. We highlight in the report, though, that there has been many tens of millions paid as a result of not being able to deliver the settlements as they were intended.
The report provides practical recommendations for the public sector to lift its game around planning, monitoring and accountability. One key recommendation is that Te Puni Kōkiri build upon recent frameworks to guide organisations to honour the holistic intent behind settlements.
How confident can we be that that might happen given the public sector is under stress with so many people's jobs, you know, like it's getting smaller and smaller?
My expectation though is these are commitments in the law and they should prioritise them.
At the Select Committee hearing, John was very clear about what's at stake.
And I think if I was to step back and think about my children, that this could be a massive opportunity, but we risk losing it. We risk losing it by not implementing these settlements, both in terms of the actual listed redress that's clear enough in the settlement process, but in the reset of relationships that comes with it. And so there's a massive opportunity for the country here that this report, I think, points to being at risk.
It's an interesting role because it doesn't matter which government is in power, you're assessing, you know, what's being done in their name. So how do you maintain that kind of objectivity and the integrity of the office, I guess?
That's a really good question. The first thing that we need to protect in the office is our independence. We can't be seen to be favouring any particular viewpoint or person or government, of course. And we take a lot of time on that. People feel independence when they're in the office, but we can't also be isolated. So we need to understand what's going on. So there's a balance in there. Then we, I guess, stand on the quality of our work, so we take time. Our work isn't fast sometimes. People criticise us for that, although we do quite quick work when we need to. So we take a lot of time to make sure what we say is fair and balanced, and any recommendations we make are really fact-based. So it is unusual for anyone to say the Auditor General's got it wrong, because we take care to get it right. And then lastly, I think it's the role of the Auditor General to speak up when things aren't right.